This shutdown feels different to me than the 2018 shutdown.
Big time.
In the way people talk about it.
The administration that is talking about hacking and slashing government would be okay, seemingly with a permanent shutdown, for lack of a better term.
His discharge records show he was shot 4 times, including 1 round to the head, which took a piece of his skull off.
The shooter that killed Charlie Kirk, I mean, in his messages, he's like, oh, this was just a whole big meme.
The PTSD he had, anyone would have.
If these 2 people were actually still in the military, they would actually probably get better care.
Welcome to the Three Guys Podcast. I'm Reuel Sample, the Senior Editor-in-Chief of the Wilmington Standard. On my left, your right, is Nick Craig from The Nick Craig Show.
Hey, Reuel.
And on my right, your left, who still hasn't been fired yet from WHQR, Ben Schachtman. Ben, how you doing, sir?
Oh, good, man.
Today we're going to talk about 2 major things that are going on right now. As of the recording today, Ben, our government is basically shut down. The Democrats decided not to fund the continuing resolution, and they are doing it over some things that they're willing to die on the Hill for.
Yeah, this is really interesting to me because, earlier in the year there was some brinksmanship and we didn't get a shutdown. And I think the left wing of the Democratic Party, I know, we could all see it. The left wing of the Democratic Party was furious that, Schumer et al. Didn't go harder on the mat for a shutdown. And now they are doing that. I think it will be really interesting to see if that resonates with anyone outside existing Democratic voters, or if that will help mobilize Democratic voters in the midterms in a way it hasn't before, because this, and I'm curious what you guys think about this shutdown feels different to me than the 2018 shutdown.
Big time.
In the way people talk about it.
Yeah.
What I'm not hearing is people feeling like it's going to impact them or the economy, and I don't particularly feel that people who aren't already, under the Democratic umbrella and planning to vote straight D's, like that this is, now the Democratic Party is in my corner. And I think the Democrats could be making a much better case for the hill that they're dying on. But as of right now, I haven't seen it.
A poll this morning, I don't know where it came from, said 65% of Americans are completely
New York
against.
Times, Siena
Was it the New York
College,
Times? Okay. Completely against this shutdown. And because the shutdown is basically on things that most people voted for in 2024.
That same poll that you're talking about asked, it's the same question. That the reason I say Democrats is because they were the ones that didn't cross the aisle and vote for the CR. It's not like, the Democrats again, whatever. But the poll was very specific in its title. It said, do you want the Democrats to shut down the government? And it broke it down by the 3 voting groups. And the number was 43% of self-identified Democrats said no, and only 47% said yes. That is a very thin margin between those 2 numbers. Obviously, Republicans was like 95% no, and independents was maybe close to 60-40 or somewhere in that ballpark. So to Ben's point of this one just kind of feels different. It's like the panic of always government is shutting down just doesn't seem to be happening this time. And some of it might be the fact that there seems to be more levity with this than ones in the past. It's almost as if nobody's really taking it too seriously. Some of that's probably the president and his giving Hakeem Jeffries and Chuck Schumer a Trump 2028 sombrero hats on Twitter. I think, Ben, to the point that you were just bringing up, like the issues, not saying healthcare is not a serious issue, but the issue at hand is not something that I think most of Americans even take as that serious of a topic or discussion, which maybe lends into the reason why it's like, okay, great, it's Wednesday morning and the government is shut down. Let's see what happens.
I think 2 other things going on. One is that, Trump and Republican strategists have managed to kind of bring this into the same field of play as reducing the government. And shutting down the government after you've been saying for 8 months or so that you want to cut the government, that you want to spend less on the government, feels different than, a government shutdown that like comes abruptly when everything was running smooth and now we've derailed. So I think that's one thing. The other thing I think is that, they have managed to sort of make light of it. But I also think the Democrats have not managed to say, like, this is the thing we're fighting for, because this is going to hit you in the pocketbook hard, in the not so distant future. And if you're not really good at communicating that, and people just hear, like, if you just read through, the Times or, CNN or CBS or whatever, it just says, oh, they're fighting over, tax credits for healthcare. So many people are so disappointed and disaffected with the healthcare system on both sides of the aisle that they're like, yeah, what else is new? It's not that they don't care. It's just that they've already been beaten down. It's like, it's defeated dog syndrome.
History has always shown that the party that initiates the shutdown of the government loses in the next election. It generally always happens that way. Democrats have been trying to tee up that they're going to get the House back for this next election. But Trump and the Republicans have successfully put them on the record for being in favor of health care to illegal immigrants, in favor of increasing government spending, in favor of not reducing some taxes, in favor of just this out of control one big beautiful bill spending. Is that going to hurt them next year, or are Americans going to forget that?
I mean, I don't know if I would inherently draw the equation to that this will affect the midterms. The thing that I find interesting about it, and going back and looking at the history of government shutdowns, because of the power of the traditional media outlets in the United States, Republicans have always been afraid of a government shutdown because you turn on CNN or any of most other major news networks on the morning after, and it's, buildings burning in the background, the government's closed, everything. I mean, it's all falling down, and it's these people's fault. It's the Republicans' fault. And it's been very interesting from a purely political standpoint to watch this administration say, you guys can vote for it if you want to. If not, we're totally okay with keeping the government closed. You can come back to the Oval Office and have a Diet Coke and a Trump 2028 hat whenever you'd like. I don't know that we've ever seen that before. The Republicans, for lack of a better term, have always just been scared shitless that it's going to be their fault that the government is shut down, whether they're in the majority or in the minority. This is one of the times where you're not seeing that, and maybe it's some of the levity that's being brought into the situation. But it's not working. If the goal is to blame the Republicans on it, I saw Schumer all over cable news on Wednesday morning, and he just wasn't able to hit it home.
Is this part of this levity directly responsible from the new media? We've got podcasts that cover all this stuff. We've got online news medias that are breaking through the noise of the legacy media.
I think that's some of it. I think, some of this is that the critique of a shutdown is failure to govern. You control both houses. You're short of the 60, but you still, you have the executive and the legislative branches. And that's been at the state level too. When Democrats couldn't pass a budget, it was embarrassing. Republicans now can't pass a budget. And that is, framed as embarrassing as a normative violation. There's lots of ways that you can continue to run the government without a budget. But it is framed by the Democrats and often by the media as, you have both hands on the wheel and you can't drive what's happening. And so to the first part of that is if the Trump administration can make it seem less serious, and Lord knows they've busted plenty of other norms that many critics of Trump are just now finding out weren't laws, weren't binding policy, where it's just like, yes, I think presidents don't usually do, but turns out they legally can. So that's part of it. And also, if you're not enamored of the self-seriousness of mainstream media that is, this grave, and now to the stock market on day one of the 2025 government shutdown. If that's not your bag, then you can go to other media outlets that are serving that up differently.
Yeah. It's October 1st, 2025. What's your prediction? How long is this thing going to go on?
Short. I don't know when this show will be published. I think it could be done by the end of the week.
By the end of the week?
I mean, the reality on all of this is, unless something dramatically happens that's outside of a government shutdown, the Trump administration's not moving off this point. There's no reason for them to. And to Ben's point earlier, the administration that is talking about hacking and slashing government would be okay, seemingly with a permanent shutdown, for lack of a better term. So they're not going to move from everything. This started more than 2 weeks ago with the original passage of the CR in the House. Democrats have not been at least able to this point frame this in any meaningful way that's resonating with a large group of voters. So, I mean, by maybe the end of this week, the big date to keep an eye on is October 15th. That will be the second Wednesday where paychecks will go out to government employees. They went out today. 2 weeks from now, if something's not done, then maybe the less serious nature of this starts to fade away when people are like, oh, there's no direct deposit this week. I think it's short. This is short and sweet.
Ben, Democrats fold shortly, or will they hold on?
I think they fold because I think, they will. I just don't think they're going to see dividends from this. I don't think they're going to see a groundswell of support for this. Again, because it'll fade out of the news cycle, and it is not being treated as cataclysmic. And you can look back to past. I mean, we're going to see how the stock market reacts. Again, if the stock market goes crazy, all bets are off. But I just don't think it will. And again, I think people feel differently about the plight of government workers now than they did, say, in 2018. If we hear, and I have friends and family who are government workers, I'm not happy about this. But I don't know if the general population is just going to be that sweaty about it. If they hear that 30,000 government workers didn't get their paychecks, or even 100,000.
Yeah.
100,000 federal workers resigned today, as part of the buyout program, and I didn't see riots in the street. And so, I just don't see it getting the Democrats to where they want to be. I still think there is just a ball of confusion on that side of the aisle about how to be the minority party and what they think their base wants them to do. I just don't know if this is it.
Well,
go ahead.
If I could just jump in on that real quick. To Ben's point about paying dividends, we are 13 months away from midterm elections. The party in the minority historically has always done very well in midterms. That's nothing new. It's not a Trump thing. It's not a Biden thing. That's been the historical norm. The Democrat Party still doesn't seemingly have their messaging squared up as to how they're going to do this. And it takes a while to roll that stuff out. You've got to slowly, subliminally beat it into people's heads, and got to constantly beat the drum over and over again to repetition. It's why there's McDonald's billboards everywhere. It's not because people don't know what McDonald's is. It's because they have to reinforce that into your head. And I am generally shocked this far, 9 months into the Trump administration, and now a major political issue between two parties, the messaging just doesn't seem to be there. And I'm shocked that they haven't coalesced behind something or someone to lay the groundwork for next November.
Well, that's the reason why I'm going to take the opposite view. I think this is going to go on for 2 weeks. I think because there is no solid Democrat leader for the Democrat Party. It's sometimes it's Chuck Schumer, but sometimes it's not. Sometimes it's Hakeem Jeffries. Sometimes it's not. Sometimes it's the squad, and sometimes it's not. Or the up-and-comer is the candidate in New York City. Is he going to be the leader of the party? So because there's no central leadership, I think this is going to go on for 2 weeks.
I agree with you on the lack of central leadership. If you're a conservative and you want to just bathe in Schadenfreude for an hour, I recommend Jon Stewart's interview with Ken Martin, who's the DNC chair, because Stewart hammers him for an hour about what is the plan, what is the vision, and Martin just keeps going back to these kind of vacuous, folksy talking points, and uses an increasing amount of profanity to show that he's tough. And Stewart calls him out on it. He just falls right into it. And it's, if you're a Democrat, this is a deeply depressing interview that I maybe don't be alone when you listen to this.
Don't be alone.
Or this podcast either, for that.
Yeah,
for that
but
fact.
it certainly it surfaces all those things that you guys are talking about there not being marching orders and messaging. Yeah. And so without that, I could see them just sort of like flopping around for 2 weeks.
Yep. And it's got to be even harder to have somebody rise above that when you've got the behemoth that is Trump and the messaging machine that he creates. So your run-of-the-mill, go back 15 or 20 years, what would have been a stronger leader in politics gets completely blown out by not only what you're seeing from Trump, but the team he has surrounded himself with and their ability to message things. That's a huge uphill battle to try and scream down Trump. I mean, it's an impossible battle. It's very tough.
Well, they're getting their direction from Kamala Harris's book, 107 Days. So that's about as good as it gets. Have you read that yet?
I just had a stroke on the left side of my face. I haven't finished it.
You want to run for president?
I have read part of it. I gotta say, I shouldn't have been shocked, but I was shocked about some of the stuff around, deciding not to run with Buttigieg.
Isn't that interesting?
I thought it was really interesting, and I think you could make an argument that was just realpolitik at work, and they were trying to be pragmatic, but also there's not a lot of people who are better at communicating and messaging and sitting down with people who clearly disagree with them and having a good conversation than Pete Buttigieg on their bench right now. And so the fact that was just dismissed out of hands based on identity politics I'm going to be unpacking that for a while. Let me just say that.
Well, I'll go on record is that if she had picked Shapiro, we might have a Kamala Harris.
I think that's too controversial with the Democrat Party.
Oh, that's true.
The religious factor plays heavily with the vocal minority. I mean, the same group that we were talking about earlier with the Schumer and the AOCs and the kind of power struggle that's ongoing. That creates a huge problem as well. It's a tough. They're in a really tough spot.
I wish I was going to be around in 100 years when they write for this era.
This is going to be a wild.
And you know what?
Wild.
The problem is they're not going to even write it. There won't be any physical publications. It'll just all be on a screen. It'll all just be e-waste at a certain point. It's very interesting.
You were talking about in our last episode about how it was interesting to see mainstream media talk about Discord.
Yeah.
So talk about like the revolution in Nepal.
Yeah.
Where the interim president was chosen on Discord. So if we do write history books, that'll be fascinating. Because there'll be a little editors know Discord was it.
Yeah. Discord was a popular online. They always call it a gaming platform, which I find fascinating.
Yeah. It's not.
I mean, it's a voice chat. It's the equivalent of old IRC channels and audio and Skype. It takes those two very popular platforms, meshes them into one. That's Discord. And it's always it's a gaming platform.
I'm too old to be on Discord. Well, that's the other thing I want to talk about, and it's actually a very serious thing because our area got brought in to an ongoing national conversation this past weekend. It was actually part of two tragedies that happened. But down in Southport, a shooter by the name of Nigel Edge, who also was known as Sean William Debevoise.
I've heard it pronounced de Beauvoir. Yeah.
Debevoise. 40-year-old Marine veteran shot up 3 people from his boat down in Southport. He was captured just a few hours later by the U.S. Coast Guard. Later on that day, there was a shooting at a Michigan. He drove into the Michigan church.
Yes, Church of Latter-day Saints.
Church of Latter-day Saints, and carried out a deadly shooting there. He then killed himself, right? He killed himself, but Nigel down here did not.
I have not followed the Michigan one. I've been spending the last 96 hours on the Southport one.
Okay.
Nigel did not. Nigel was taken into custody.
Yes.
Yeah.
2 Marines, former Marines. What's going on, Ben?
Well, I can speak to the Nigel Edge case.
Mm-hmm.
So in the wake of 9/11, a guy he's from upstate New York, right after 9/11, he signed up. And in 2003, he enlisted. He was able to actually, get boots on ground.
Yeah.
He served in Haiti and then he served in Iraq. In 2006, very, very badly wounded. His medical records, his discharge records show he was shot 4 times, including 1 round to the head, which took a piece of his skull off.
That's amazing.
And there's still a fragment of the bullet in his head after 2006. Doctors told him he would never walk again because his legs had been badly wounded. Comes back to the United States in 2007. The Star News actually profiled him as part of a program New Hanover Regional Medical Center was doing to try and get better recovery care for vets without having to ship them to Charlotte.
Mm-hmm.
And then I think in 2015 they did another story about him, kind of a happier just fluff piece because he was starting a charter company. So it was Marine vet starts new charter company.
Mm-hmm.
And
did they interview him under the name of Debevoise at that point?
At the time, it
Okay.
was Sean Debevoise.
And he was invited to the Country Music Awards in 2012.
In 2012, Kelly Pickler
publicly thanked on stage for his service.
Kelly Pickler took him and Rusty, his dog, and there was coverage of that. And from neighbors we've talked to, his ex-wife spoke with NBC, I believe, and law enforcement. There were some warning signs. He seems to have gone really downhill around 2019, and then the pandemic seems to have been really brutal for him, just isolating. And the worst of what, again, I'm not a doctor, but like what appears to be pretty profound mental disturbances just got on top of him and stayed on top of him.
Mm-hmm.
The reaction to this it was just an amazing thing. You're sitting at a dock eating dinner, and you get shot from the water.
And in Southport, that's what makes it such a weird story. Is Southport, and I don't say this with any disrespect, but it's a sleepy, tiny little town. I mean, there's like half a dozen restaurants out on that area where the American Fish Company is. There's a small little strip of business, or two small strips of businesses downtown. It is a very small, sleepy, southern, tight-knit community. And for it to, obviously violence anywhere is bad, but you closed your eyes, you would never picture somebody rolling up to a dock in Southport and shooting you. It's just not even something that you could comprehend.
Exactly, yeah. Like 10 years in New York, I was in Jersey across the river for 9/11, and you're just used to hearing about violence. There was a bombing in Times Square when I was there. There was always well-armed NYPD in the subways. Whenever something happened and there was a threat, there'd be, a show of force, and you'd see dozens of guys at Penn Station, or Union Station. And, you were always just a little, you don't even realize it after a while, but you are just always a little bit on edge. Your head's on swivel. You're just a little bit more prepared and alert in an urban area like that. Southport is the psychological opposite of that.
100%. Like, you won't find a place where you just generally feel more comfortable and generally safer than South. Even during the 4th of July festival, when it is packed down there, it is still it does not feel chaotic. It's not stressful. Like going to New York City, or even going to Charlotte or Raleigh can be a stressful experience. There's so much going on. You just don't ever feel, I've never felt that in Southport. I've been down there dozens of times.
It's like why they set I Know What You Did Last Summer in a town like that, because that the horror comes from the violation of that kind of sleepy all-American quiet town.
Yeah. Let's be clear. This guy served in the United States Marine Corps, 2003, 2009. I served with the Marines. These guys are tough as nails. He rose to the rank of sergeant in 6 years, and that's a good achievement. And he's a hero. He gave life and limb, or at least limb, to the United States. Something went wrong. And then later on that day, we had another former Marine go into a church in Michigan. Have you been following this?
Yeah, a little bit. He drove his car through it and I think tried to detonate something. I don't know if he was successful. I don't think he shot anybody. I could be wrong about that. It was more of using a vehicle as the weapon and as the kind of the vehicle of choice for chaos and destruction. This goes in specifically the going back to the Southport story. In the day after he lives in Oak Island. Mm-hmm. He's a resident of Oak Island. You had the police chief of Oak Island say, "We're very well aware of this guy. He has consistently sued the city. He's sued our police department, frivolous lawsuits." And so it appears, I don't know this individual. Ben, you posted, you had a great post on your Facebook about some interactions you've had with him. Something was obviously off. You're not suing your municipality and their police department consistently over and over again when over nothing, essentially.
Yeah, if the most telling one. So in 2020, he self-published a book as Sean de Beauvoir, which alludes to some of this stuff and makes the kind of shocking allegation that he was fragged and that he wasn't injured by enemy fire. He makes that much more explicit in a 2024 lawsuit he filed against the United States of America in federal court, where he lays out, I have to call it a grand delusion, where he explains being a feral child who was kidnapped by people who he does not believe to be his biological parents, who sex trafficked him to Epstein's Island, the same group of people. He claims the same people involved in that were involved in orchestrating 9/11 and were responsible for the war crimes at Abu Ghraib. It is really like a far-reaching and almost difficult to wrap your head around conspiracy theory.
Wow.
And threaded through that are the very real things that happened to him. Recovering from a traumatic brain injury and having chronic PTSD and recovering the use of his leg and struggling to find a place for himself in post-combat life and trying to find people who would care about him And it's sometimes hard to tell when he was talking about caring about the very strange story he was telling, or just caring about the very real story of that this is a Marine who, like so many other Marines, came back to the States and just had, cold shoulder after cold shoulder. And that's what you're getting at, I think. And that is the really tough part of the story, is that this is an exceptional case. And one of the things I worry about is that we will start to get this kind of stereotype that we had after Vietnam, where these people who are dealing with mental health issues because they went through some extraordinarily difficult times are now like these loose cannons that we need to be worried about. And that's just not true. And I've already seen people posting stuff like that on social media, and I just shake my head that that's their takeaway from this.
Well, I'll tell you what, there's a local TV station who ran an article on the revelation that both of them served at Camp Lejeune. So what? I mean, every Marine goes through Camp Lejeune. Yeah. But I want to bring our discussion into, we had these two, and there are those on the left who are saying, see, white males with a gun.
I saw that. I saw a lot of that.
But earlier this year, you've had folks like Robin, who used to be Robert, shoot up a Catholic church, who transgender. The person who took out Charlie Kirk was a transgender activist. I guess that's probably good thing, a good thing to say. And then you have the shooter at ICE, who had anti-ICE things. Then what was it, last year or 2 years ago? You had another shooting at a Christian school. What is the common denominator with all of these folks?
I would push back a little on the transgender activist thing, just because I don't think I'm not saying that's not a possibility. Very plausible. But I don't think we've nailed that down yet. I think there's something underneath that I want to get at.
Yeah.
And that is, you can always find far-right extremists and far-left extremists, but there seems to be something else happening. I've heard it referred to as black pilling. And these are extremely online, extremely alienated young men who feel like there is not a place for them in society. Often they are young white men. I've heard a couple people put this better than me. But basically, they're dealing with two conflicting sets of experiences. They're being told that because they're white men, that they have all the privilege and all the access and all the power and all the keys to the car and they should be just nonstop winning. And that is not their lived experience. They are involuntarily celibate, as it's sometimes put. No, but they're having difficulty romantically. They have difficulty making human relationships. They are not multimillionaire. Even if they're hustlers, they have not hustled their way into like a multi-million-dollar beach house. And that's a really shearing experience, right? Because they're feeling like, why am I the bad guy in this social narrative when I feel like I'm losing? And at the same time, they're not necessarily going to then drift into white supremacy or white Christian nationalism or any kind of right-wing extremism. They're just kind of like, this is all bullshit. And the only thing left is nihilism. Is kind of this like super dark humor, super like just super dark, outlook on life. And from that point of view, it's really hard to put a partisan political lens on top of the violence.
Black-pilled incels or something else going on?
I mean, the term that Ben is describing, they're called Zoomers based on their generation. Their other nickname is Doomers. They're permanently doomed. They feel like there's no hope in anything. And I think a lot of it is to especially when you look at more predominantly younger white males who tend to be the individuals who are responsible for these atrocious acts that take place. There is, I think, a lot of the psychological issue of you're privileged, and at the same time, because of that privilege, you're bad. But if you're down on your luck and you grew up in a home with maybe just one parent and you're lower income, lower middle class, and you don't have all of those luxuries, you're like, well, what the hell? So I think that's an important part of it. I grew up in an era where I would have not fall into that category, but I spent an exorbitant, way more than my parents probably should have let me, amount of time online. And I did foster very great relationships with individuals. Part of the reason I live in North Carolina is because of those relationships that I formed. It's hard. I guess looking back on it, it's hard to probably break out of that. If you get sucked into one silo, it's probably very hard to take the blinders off and see what else is available. And I think part of the reason why you're seeing schools go through with now they all have these cell phone bags that you can't open up is these kids are actually getting a break 7 hours a day where they can't go on Discord. They can't go on and see what their flame score is on Reddit and spin stuff up over there or post on websites like 4chan or 8chan or whatever it might be. That's the only break that they're getting. The internet is an amazing tool. It's the only reason anybody is watching or listening to us right now. There are darker corners. I do think that some of these younger individuals are probably, when I say preyed upon, I'm not talking about in a sexual manner, but preyed upon. They're young, impressionable minds. I mean, one of the big discussions that, you hear on the Republican side of the aisle is, schools, indoctrination camps, teachers are using their leverage, their position of power to affect young minds. That exact same thing is happening online. And I don't know, to Ben's point, I don't know that you can immediately narrow down on an ideological bend. A lot of it is memes. I mean, we saw the shooter that killed Charlie Kirk. I mean, in his messages, he's like, this was just a whole big meme. I mean, you just shot and killed somebody, you blew up somebody's neck in front of 3,000 people. And your immediate response is, it's a meme, bro. That's insane.
Yeah, I mean, we talked a lot about that in our newsroom about how shocking that was compared to, acts of directly political violence, where you could kind of immediately feel what the reason was. And if people did leave messages, they were usually either manifestos that were, at length explaining why they did it, or something that concisely explained it, vive la resistance for whatever cause. And in this case, it was a series of nested jokes.
Yeah.
And
talk about dark humor. I mean, it doesn't get any
any darker than that.
That's right.
Yeah, and mainstream media being like, "Oh, we think it's this," and then thankfully, some intern in the New York Times was like, "Actually, that's a meme."
Yeah. Like,
sorry.
What does Oh Bella Chow mean? Like, it's a meme.
Yeah, they're like, "Oh, it's a resistance." I'm like, "Well, it was 80 years ago, but these things mutate and evolve."
Yeah. Now, the shooter in Memphis left a manifesto. It took a while to get to it. And did the shooter in Minnesota did he also leave a manifesto as well?
I have not heard.
I don't think that again wasn't a manifesto. It was that really weird 9-minute YouTube video that he had published the night before of same thing, written on the side of bullets or on the side of a thing. If you're reading this, you're gay. LOL. Just stuff that is online internet humor written on the side of an AR mag is just very bizarre it's bizarre for me, who has grew up hearing this stuff online, posting it plenty online, and then to see it written on the side of a firearm 12 hours before a kid goes and shoots up a school is it's almost like blending two worlds that are not connected together. It's very, very bizarre.
Ben, the first reaction from the left, always in these things, we need more gun control.
We need more gun control.
Is that fair?
I mean, on the whole, yeah. I'd say 80% of the reactions I saw from people I know who are on the left, not even, and I don't mean the far left. I just mean from the center on over.
Yeah,
is gun control. And we could have a whole other podcast about that. Maybe we will. But I do think it's interesting that so the poster child for that would be Nigel Edge, for example.
Yeah.
He's a skilled marksman. He was a scout sniper, and that's a 300 blackout. It's a powerful weapon. And I don't try to think about this as an activist. I think about this from a law enforcement point of view. So you've got caliber, capacity, and concealability. And in this case, he knew how to conceal himself. He had a high caliber weapon, and he had high enough caliber, or high enough capacity magazines, or the skill to replace magazines quickly. So he could put a lot of lead down range in a short period of time. And he shot 8 people in an incredibly short period of time.
Do we have a motive yet?
We don't.
Yeah.
But my point is that if he, if those weapons were illegal, if we could only use what I used growing up hunting in New Jersey, which is a shotgun that was stopped so it could only hold 2 rounds and 1 in the chamber, he would have killed fewer people. He still would have killed people. But I think the more and more you look at some of these other attacks where people have used vehicles as weapons. Or the rifle that was used to kill Charlie Kirk is a 120-year-old rifle. I mean, the 30-06 is from 1906. That's not new technology. And Democrats frequently say when they're introducing gun control legislation, we're not coming for your Peepaw's hunting rifle. Well, it turns out that rifle is incredibly deadly in even moderately skilled hands. And so it is a little frustrating that people try to condense the whole argument down to this would all be fixed if we just had gun control, because the things that would probably be exempt, handguns, family firearms, stuff like that, are still incredibly dangerous in the hands of someone who wants to kill people. But also, if we had no guns,
They find a way.
they would find a way. Would fewer people be killed? Yes. Is there room for debate? Yes. But the suggestion, and again, social media reduces everything to its shortest and dumbest form. But the suggestion that, everyone would still be alive today if we had no guns, or if we, didn't have, extended capacity magazines. It's just, that is an unnuanced argument. It is a little frustrating that it is the first thing that comes across the line every time.
Now on the right, the first reaction of the Republican Party and those on the right is that's not the guns. It's
Guns
something
don't
else.
kill people. People kill
guns
people.
don't kill people. People kill
Yep.
people. Well, is that fair? Or what is the reaction from the right? Thoughts and prayers? Or
That's typically what the right goes, and I think that's probably more of a both sides thing. Everybody's quick to jump to thoughts and prayers. This case is unlike really anything else that, at least that I've seen, when we look at these atrocious acts of violence. It wasn't a school that was shot up. This wasn't a young individual. This wasn't some twisted around 18-year-old that had some things in their past. This is an individual, as you noted at the top, we're going through his background, a very skilled individual, somebody that literally took a bullet to the head for the United States. This is a very interesting discussion on red flag laws is really what this comes down to. The Governor Josh Stein was in Southport on Monday. He held a news conference. He didn't bring it up, but I think it was
the elephant in the room.
Well, some NNO or WRL reporter. Oh, what do you think about red flag laws, Governor Stein? Just of course, and he did not go whole hog on it because he understands that, as Ben was noting, that is not inherently the solution to the problem. He didn't dismiss it. He said, in a case like this, and for those on the right that always push back against the gun control argument, the question always is, in this case, would a red flag law have taken Nigel Edge's weapons away? Probably, since he was in active litigation with his own police department in the town he lived multiple times. Probably. But what about individuals who have that system weaponized against them? That's always the immediate gut reaction to red flag laws, which are equal. Gun control would be enforced through things like red flag laws. So this is a very unique case because this is an individual that fits an obvious and clear pattern of severe, not just mental illness, but PTSD from serving for the United States of America. Everybody seemed well aware. The Brunswick County Sheriff knew him. All the Oak Island people knew him. This was not a stranger to society. And then he goes out and tried to do it on Friday night, as we would then learn.
It was crazy seeing that footage.
The video's insane. I mean, he's literally sitting at the dock Friday and somebody else rolls up on a boat trying to get something to eat or drink.
You can see the lettering on the side, the name of the boat, and it's just floating there, and it's like...
He's ready to do it, but another boat pulled up and I guess blew his cover.
So he was just, it sounds like it wasn't a targeted thing at all.
Well, it could have been targeted. Well, they did say targeted, but they didn't make it clear whether it was the restaurant, somebody that worked there, the owner.
Yeah, that was very odd language because it was very specific language saying this was a targeted attack, which was different than saying that, that this is an isolated attack. Yeah. Because he was in custody. So they could have reassured the public using different language.
Okay.
But saying it was targeted made it feel like, yeah, it was that location or someone at that location.
Yeah. Well, early social media rumors were like, oh, something to do with his parents, but then that doesn't fit the narrative of Friday and Saturday. Yeah. So it's not immediately clear.
One thing, just real quick, I want to say to the next point is that I have seen over the years, both parties will do this. There'll be a terrible tragedy like this, and one side or the other, or sometimes both together in bipartisan legislation, will name an act after the person and craft the legislation around almost too closely around the details of that crime. Mm-hmm. And because you could be cynical and say that they're trying to never let a crisis go to waste, or you could be more charitable and say like they're trying to say what law would have prevented this. But either way, it is often missing the bigger net that would be necessary, because the exact combination of red flag, like you could make red flag laws that had different, thresholds, and setting one up that would have caught Nigel Edge might not catch other people. Mm-hmm. So I think that is sometimes the too hasty political impulse to say we have to act, we have to do something. It has to be, it has to spring from this event. And so there are things that Nigel Edge did that, we could make a law and say like, okay, if you file a lawsuit against the government, and you're clearly, delusional, then we can do some kind of welfare check. And if you have weapons, we can take them for 30 days.
I think that's what gives people the shivers, though, is that who determines clearly delusional?
Yes. Well, it's not illegal to be crazy, for one. I've talked to I've talked to a lot of law enforcement people about this, and I said, the one big problem here is that there were welfare checks on him over the years. Mm-hmm. His truck would be in the same spot for like a week, and they would go and knock on his door. They can't kick in his door if he doesn't answer. If they don't hear a scream or a gunshot or smell gas, mm-hmm. they have to just say like, yeah, we knocked on the door and he didn't come out. And if they talk to him and he's spinning a wild conspiratorial tale, but he's not a threat to himself or others, it's not a TTL, then there's nothing they can do. And if you try to take the law beyond that, to your point, you are going to have false positives. Mm-hmm. That is going to cause a huge amount of blowback. I share this personally. My grandfather used to keep all the family guns in a case in his house. I think he still keeps a lot of them. Mm-hmm. Because we'd always go down to where he lived in South Jersey, and we'd leave from there to go hunting. So good place to store all the guns and ammo. Mm-hmm. And we had a cousin who was going through something, and there was a red flag law trigger on him. I don't know if it was a DVO or what, but they came to my grandfather's house and took his guns because that's where my cousin had given us his address.
Wow.
My grandfather lost his mind. As like a very conservative Catholic pro-gun guy, he's like, this was literally the nightmare scenario that he'd been telling everyone about, and we'd all been like, yeah, Grandpa.
Yeah, all right.
Cool story, Grandpa.
Pops, yeah, sure. The government's going to come and steal your guns. All
the
right.
government came and took his guns, and a thing happened. But I do think that's, and it's, when we're talking about red flag laws, we're also talking about a broader category of laws about, putting people in psych holds and delaying bond. So we're talking about constitutional infringements that go beyond the Second Amendment ones that conservatives are specifically concerned about. Mm-hmm. We're talking about, Fourth and 14th Amendment concerns too. And it's like, do you want a government that plays fast and loose with that? It's like that is a dangerous slope. And I think liberals should be just as concerned as Republicans if we're talking about that.
Well, and it's interesting because I believe that with every right that we have, whether it's the First Amendment, we talked about that last time, mm-hmm. or the Second Amendment, or whatever amendments that enumerate our rights, not give us our rights, but enumerate our rights, there is an inherent understanding that there's a responsibility that goes with those rights, is that you have free speech, but you have to use it responsibly.
Sure.
You're not free from the consequences. And we are acknowledged that we can carry weapons, but there's a responsibility for that. Where does that end? I mean, is that a community action? Should every community be given the right to do its own red flag laws? Is it at the state level? Is it a federal level? Because the thing that happens with all of these mass shootings, whether it's just with the Charlie Kirk thing, or with this one, or with the one in Michigan, or the one in Las Vegas. We seem to forget about that one.
Oh, the country shooting one? The country concert,
that there is some sort of mental health problem with all of these folks. Yeah. That with any kind of objective look, they shouldn't have a BB gun, right? Much less a rifle.
But it's not. I don't disagree with what you're saying, but I'll push back on it when you look at the horrific story in Charlotte back about 5 or 6 weeks ago with Irina Zaruska getting murdered on the Charlotte light rail. No guns. That individual couldn't have legally possessed a gun because he was already a convicted felon. So he was in front of a 23-year-old girl, and he sliced her neck open with a freaking pocket knife.
And who is later.
But at the point, right. But it's the mental illness thing that is and I don't necessarily know that I want to. I think we should draw a distinction. There is a difference between mental illness and PTSD. I think those are things that need to be handled very differently.
Yeah,
there's schizophrenics like the guy that killed Irina, and then there's a guy who gets is part of his skull blown off in war. That's different.
Yes, and I'm so glad you said that because I've seen some of this conflation online, and it's hurtful to people who have PTSD.
Oh, big time.
And the PTSD he had, anyone would have, right? If you had been through that level of like visceral, just injury, it would be odd if you didn't. We'd be worried if you had some kind of dissociative disorder if you didn't have any PTSD. So he was labeled chronically disabled, chronically PTSD, and he was disabled after that. But from all accounts, including reporters I know who met him and talked to him, he was not as agitated or paranoid or conspiratorial or delusional as he was when I talked to him in 2024.
Oh, you talked to him directly?
Yeah, I spoke with him directly last year.
Okay.
And he was clearly, these were clear delusions. Consistent, persistent. He told the same story more than once without reading from a script, same details. So he obviously believed it. It was just not, in my view, just not a possible thing that could have happened. But he believed it completely. And that is not the account I've heard of him from, say, 2017 or 2007.
Yeah.
And so an additional level of mental health problem came about that was maybe related to PTSD and maybe not, but we don't know. So yeah, I'm glad you brought that. But with the Zaruska thing, again, yeah, not a gun. It was a knife.
And not even just a knife. This is like walk into any gas station.
Sure.
Here. The little things with their kids' names on it at the gift shops in downtown Wilmington, the little corkscrew openers and all those little tchotchke things. This wasn't a Bowie knife or a machete. This is a little tiny little pocket knife.
It's another one where I feel like I completely understand people, especially if you're not a criminal justice expert, you're just a layperson, and you feel like there was a missed opportunity. I understand that frustration and rage, honestly, because they felt like he was in January or early February were arrested for
the 911
was for arrested. It's a class 1 misdemeanor, so it's something you could be detained for. It's the most serious class of misdemeanors. He was let out on a promise to appear, so $0 bond. Is that common with misdemeanors? Yeah. If they had looked at his criminal history, could they have said this guy's a danger? They could have. It would have been unusual though, because this was a lower level. If this was a violent crime that he committed in January, I think the magistrate would have been much more inclined to say, like, let's hold this guy. He's a flight risk, if nothing else, because he's got this serious history and he's now facing, habitual felon charges, if nothing else.
Yeah.
But he has been declared non-compos mentis too, hasn't he?
Not yet.
Not officially.
So that's what I'm getting to, right?
But he's declared schizophrenic.
Yeah. But schizophrenics can stand trial.
That's true.
Yeah.
So the opportunity here, and they didn't actually file the paperwork until like July for the 911 misdemeanor, was to, okay, let's send him to a local hospital and get him checked out to see if he's competent to stand trial. So this is not you get out of the trial because you're mentally unwell. It's just like you stay in a facility until they basically, it's like a crash course insanity, Like they walk you through the basic rules of physics and reality. And as soon as you can say like, I know where I am, I know who the president is, I know it's Tuesday, you get to it's not a high bar. You get to a certain level, then you can stand trial.
It's Wednesday, Ben.
Well, I'm not standing trial then.
And Trump is your president.
I'm struggling with that more than the day, believe me. But that's the opportunity, right? Was to have him checked out and held in a mental facility for some period of time until he was going to stand trial. And then he would have stood trial and maybe at max served a short period of time for a class 1 misdemeanor and then be back out on the streets. I think some people felt like there was an opportunity to put him in a mental institution, keep him off the streets.
Well, he could have been somebody in his family, and it's interesting because in the immediate aftermath, his mother did make the comment. I think it may have been the New York Post or somebody was the only one that was able to reach her, and she made the comment to them, and it could have been local media in Charlotte too. He should not have been out. And then a lot of the question was, well, why didn't you involuntarily, which you can do, you can involuntarily commit a family member. That is something that you have the ability to do. Whether this individual would have met the threshold for involuntary commitment, maybe a little bit of a flip of a coin, but there is a process for involuntarily committing somebody who could potentially pose some sort of risk or
Yeah,
danger.
you have to be able to illustrate that they're a danger to
I mean,
themselves.
he's hit multiple.
And
He had a
others.
felon. He had one of his felonies was armed robbery. He had a couple of B&Es. I mean, I think there could have been, if somebody was hell bent enough on, not blaming his mother.
Yeah.
If somebody like his mother said, and by the way, he was also homeless, just roaming the streets of downtown Charlotte. If somebody was really hell bent on getting him off the streets and somewhere else, whether that state hospital, whatever the facility would have been, they could have probably done it.
I will say, having known families who have been through this, I don't think that the felony was in 2012. It was a felony breaking and entering, or 2013. He finally went to prison in 2015, served a little over 5 years for it. And that was the other comments the mother made, was that he was profoundly changed when he came out. His mental health was not better. Shockingly, after spending 5 years in prison, his mental health was not better. But I don't know if you could use the past criminal behavior to prove he was a danger to others. I think the bar is clear and present. But even if you could do that, and I think if a family was really committed to it, they could do
For
it.
sure.
But then you have 72 hours ish, right? And then
that's what I was going to say. Is that it's involuntary is only for 72 hours, right?
or thereabouts.
Yeah.
And then you have to get them into a facility at your own cost, And if you don't have insurance, and I don't know what the family's financial situation is, but I know, middle class families that have struggled with this because they couldn't afford it. Best case scenario, there's a place in Charlotte, I think it's called Hope Way, where you could do the best case path is you use the court system to get someone into an emergency 72 hour period, and during that time they're stabilizing them, which usually means medicating them, keeping them from hurting themselves or others. Then when they're a little more calm, a little more lucid, you get them into inpatient care for 90 days. And over that 90 days, you get them some approximation of sanity and stability. And then you can move them off to, daycare, or outpatient care. But that inpatient care is $1,000 a day.
Wow.
And again, I know several, even affluent families who just at a certain point don't have $90,000.
And so that brings up an interesting question as to what do you do in those cases? And not, I wouldn't consider myself a subject matter expert on it, but you look back through the 50s, 60s, and early 70s, you had, they were called psych wards. They were called mental institutions. I know that some folks might not think those are the prettiest names to use, but there's one right on Front Street in downtown Wilmington. They existed throughout the country. Those were deemed, in some cases, probably rightfully so, inhumane, and almost all of them were shut down. And now you're faced with the situation that Ben just described, where if you're not violent enough to be thrown in prison, and your family doesn't have enough money to put you somewhere, you essentially, if you're homeless, in the case of the DeCarlos Brown Jr. story, you are essentially going to roam the streets until you do something so violent, slitting a girl's neck on Charlotte Light Rail, that you either rot in prison for the rest of your life or you get the death penalty. That is the path. It's laid out. The game board is laid out. We can very clearly track how this is going to go.
I covered a case. I don't know if you were in town when the Serpentarium was around. Well, I imagine you.
I was not.
Before your time.
Before my time.
There was a fantastic place, this guy named Larry Dean Ripa. Kind of a crazy guy in that he had traveled the world and collected the world's deadliest, most venomous snakes, and a crocodile and a albino python, and had them all in a museum, in a zoo, a serpentarium, in downtown Wilmington. He'd been bitten many, many times. He should have been dead multiple times over. He was tragically killed by his wife, who was having a truly psychotic episode.
Wow.
She was, according to the prosecutors when I was at the final hearing, she was watching cartoons and thought she became the cartoon she was watching. Wow. It's like a real psychological break with reality, and shot him, I think 3 times in the head. And she was found not guilty by reason of insanity, and then sent to Central Hospital, so a state-run mental hospital.
That's in Raleigh, correct?
Yeah.
I think that's is that the only?
There's 3.
There's 3, okay.
Yeah, there's Sherry Butner, I want to say, maybe, and Central. There's 3, I know there's 3 in the state. But it's expensive for the insurance companies and the family and the state. It is not it's not as bad as being on the street. Certainly, it is a better option. It is not as bad as the sanitariums of old, but it's grim. It's a grim outcome. And she obviously had been struggling with psychosis on and off for years and wasn't able to get help. And this is, maybe the best worst case scenario. But that's the only other option other than, the death penalty and rotting in prison. None of these are great options. And if it's someone you care about, like I know it's very difficult for people to like have their heart go out to someone who's killed a young woman. Like that's a tough ask. But it feels a little different when it's someone who has, gone around the bend or has fallen on dark times mentally. And then you're like, it's a little easier to be empathetic. So I'm not shaming people for not, crying their eyes out for it. But it is a horrible situation in terms of what we have systemically. And I think that's kind of what you're getting at. We can't go, I don't know if we should go back to the kind of, Arkham Asylum days
I was
of
going
old.
to bring up Arkham, but I didn't know.
Well, that's
Great movie, great set of video games.
Yeah, but that's the model,
books.
right? That was and that tone of kind of like the dingy, moldy, poorly lit, state-run facility is well earned because there were a lot of poorly run facilities.
The irony of all this is that because I was a Navy chaplain, I dealt with a lot of mental health issues in my time. Is that if these two people were actually still in the military, they would actually probably get better care in the military, because in the military, your entire being, including your mental health, belongs to the United States government. And so if you say, I'm going to kill somebody, well, you are swept off and you're disarmed, you're taken care of. If you say, I'm going to kill myself, well, you're going to be taken care of. I actually remember a phone call in the middle of the night saying, hey, chaplain, I've got a person down here who I think you need to come down and see if he's suicidal. And I asked, well, what is he saying? Well, he wants to kill himself. Well, Gunny, he's suicidal, so you take care of those things in the military. And it's ironic that if those folks had been still in the military, they probably would have been taken better care of. But the question is, and it's an ongoing question that we're not going to be able to solve here, is what do you do out here in a free society where our individual rights are paramount to who we are? We've got these God-given rights of freedom of speech, freedom to bear arms, freedom to go where we want, freedom not to be imprisoned by the government. But at the same time, if we are mentally unable to have those kind of rights, then what do we do as a society? Does it rest on the family? Does it rest on local churches? Does it rest on the local constabulary? Who does it rest on? We haven't done that well.
Well, no, and I think that the problem is there's no one size fits all solution. I mean, you could write a check for the state of North Carolina could write a check for $1 gazillion tomorrow for mental health care. It will not solve the problem. The federal government could do the same thing. The city of Wilmington or New Hanover County could write they could have a big fat check signing ceremony for mental health funding. Is it a piece of the equation? Absolutely. Is it the solution to the problem? Not even close.
Right.
And I think that's why, the immediate call of more money for this or more money of that, from myself speaking personally, it just kind of falls on deaf ears, especially when you look into the numbers and you see, we have spent a lot of money on these programs or these services, or the churches and various nonprofit groups. They have spent a lot of time and effort. That doesn't mean that their work is for naught, but it's not the one size fits all solution for every problem. What a homeless man is dealing with in downtown Wilmington that's addicted to crack is completely different than some severe mental delusions that Nigel Edge is having down in Oak Island. And the idea that a church or nonprofit or a check from the government to a facility is the solution to those two things, to those two same things, is actually insane, because they're two completely disconnected situations, similar circumstances to some extent, if you were talking about mental illness or substance abuse, whatever. But there is no one size fits all. And the right's immediate reaction is we just need to throw more people in jail, which we know is not a solution. And the left's immediate reaction is, well, if we just spent more money on mental health care, then everybody in society would be throwing flower petals all over you every time you walked into the store, and we'd be living in some big happy universe. Neither is a practical solution to the problem.
Nigel Edge is facing the death penalty.
Possibly.
I think
Potentially.
That's what I think that's what the prosecutor down there is going to go for. Right?
If he's anything like his brother, then it's possible. He used. I was surprised. He used some strong language. I think he said, "Evil came ashore."
In Southport, yeah.
In Southport. And usually they prosecutors, by law, are much more measured. They can't really weigh in on a case before they're in a courtroom, and then they can do the whole courtroom theatrics. So there's some metaphorical wiggle room there. So we didn't. But it was stronger than usually hear a prosecutor talk, and so I think they will seriously consider it. The question of whether or not he's competent to stand trial, I think will be an issue, and I think it will take some time to get through that based on the DeCarlos Brown situation. I mean, it looks like it's going to take a couple months for that to get resolved.
Wow.
Murder trials take a long time anyway, and so I think it'll be a long time before we see the end of that. One thing I wanted to circle back real quick to what you were saying was that, Nick, I agree with you. I think there's such a spectrum of mental health issues, and it's the idea that under the Affordable Care Act, it bolstered this parity regulation where insurance companies are forced to take mental health as seriously as physical health, which I think is good. Because otherwise they would just be like, yeah, we're not reimbursing you. They're not.
It's not real. We're not going to reimburse.
It's not
you.
real.
Yeah.
Because and they also healthcare companies wanted to use the metrics of recovery from physical injuries as a basis of psychological recoveries. So you're in a car accident 2 weeks later, well, you better be up and walking because we're on our dime.
It doesn't matter if that bone's healed yet.
Yeah.
You've got to be. Yeah.
But if you've had a psychic break and it's I think 45 days is the longest I've heard of an Obamacare or ACA plan covering people, and you've still got 45 days more before your doctor thinks like you're going to be okay to be out amongst the rest of us, that's a problem. But I think more funding for healthcare, putting more funding into a broken healthcare system, I think is not going to fix it. I think the healthcare system is so badly jacked up that just opening the spigot more on the funding side, I don't think would fix it. So that's one thing.
Yeah.
The other thing is that so many people that I've known, stories that I've covered, people I know personally, who have been through a psychological episode, who've struggled with schizophrenia or manic depression or bipolar disorder, they call it now. There has been an involuntary component, where they have, self-medicated to the point where they got a DUI and they end up in drug court or end up in mental health court, or they try to hurt themselves and they end up on a 72-hour hold, and that gives them the time to reflect and they have some lucidity and they're like, oh God, I thought I was doing good. Turns out here I am shackled to a bed, so I am not obviously doing good. That really drives the point home, I think, waking up in the all-white room.
It does.
And so, and that is the part that I think rightly freaks people out, right? Is that so often there is this involuntary moment where the state steps in and takes away your freedom. And then you're like, it's almost like 1984, like thank you for showing me the way. And like these people have gone on to live, happy, fulfilling lives. But that is a scary moment for both, constitutional and philosophical reasons that, the state stepped in and took away your humanity for a short period of time so you could get yourself together. And I don't know if everyone's comfortable with that part of the solution, even though it so often seems to be part of the solution.
Yeah. So let us know your comments. What are your thoughts? We're living in a free society is incredibly messy. It will always be very messy.
So I just want to point out one thing that Ben noted about these people have these come to Jesus moments, right? A lot of times you see it with drunk drivers. I've been buzz driving my entire life until it's a couple few too many, and you end up either seriously harming yourself or almost seriously harming somebody else. And now I've been sober 9 or 10 years, or you've course corrected. That happens with people that have the mental capacity to come to the realization, wake up shackled to the bed and realize, oh my God, my life is on brink of total collapse. Mm-hmm. What do you do with the individual who has been arrested 14 times, has already been convicted of all these felonies? That's the unique circumstance of the case in Charlotte and some of these other cases of individuals that have had that run. And what would be, to any of us here and everybody watching, would be the biggest wake-up reality check of our lives people have done it a half a dozen, 2 dozen times and still doesn't click. That's what's so interesting about it.
Leave us your comments. Let us know what you think. What should we start doing? So as we wrap up, as always, wanted to share what caught your brain this week. I'll start. My wife and I went to a fantastic concert at Greenfield Lake last week, and just a reminder that we live in such an incredibly culturally wonderful area. You know, we've got Greenfield Lake, we've got Live Nation downtown, we've got so many little nooks and crannies of music, and in this day and age where we're talking about some very serious stuff, if you haven't gotten out to do some music, get out. You're a musician, aren't you?
Very amateurish. Yeah.
Very amateurish, but Wilmington's a great place.
Pretty much every night of the week, there's music going on somewhere.
Yeah. Ben?
I'm trying to think. I gotta be honest. It's kind of a grim week. I will say, I heard from a lot of people over the last week that I don't usually hear from, and it was as bad as what happened in Southport was. It was refreshing to have conversations that were a little bit more like the one we had today, that were more about, wow, it may be an intractable problem. It's a doozy, but that didn't immediately descend into like partisan bickering and finger pointing, and just sort of like there was grief, and then there was like, okay, what do we do?
Yeah,
and that's a tough conversation, but maybe not as fruitless as the endless saber rattling.
I don't think it has to be. That's we're just three normal guys. Well,
allegedly.
Nick. On a very light note,
Good.
the NFL had their first game in Germany this past weekend. So that game started at 9:30 a.m. Eastern time, 5 hours ahead in Germany. And in North Carolina, bars cannot serve alcohol before 10 a.m. That is state law. I will admit I've never tried to drink before 10 a.m., but many places advertising, we're going to open up early for football fans, but we cannot serve until 10 o'clock. I thought that was interesting, to say the least. Yeah.
So some folks enjoyed a football game for the first time in years without.
Well, no, I mean, let's be clear. The football game was like 3 hours. The game started at 9:30. By about the end of the first quarter, you could order. But yeah, I thought that was. I mean, not many bars, I would imagine, are open before 10 a.m. anyway. But I'm curious, like there's a lot of popular brunch places in town. They're not serving mimosas before 10 a.m. That seems interesting. I don't know how that works.
I can tell you unofficially, without naming names, there are some restaurants that don't ring up beverages before
10 a.m.
Oh, okay.
There you go.
So it's not officially sold.
As far as the ABC and the beautiful state of North Carolina knows, no, not at all. Just a huge amount of sales at 10:01.
Yeah.
So
60 mimosas at 10:01. It happens every Sunday.
Every Sunday. We don't know what's happening.
Yeah. Again, Nick, thanks a lot.
Thanks,
you are on the Nicholas Craig Show.
Yep, nickcraigshow.com.
And every morning, Monday through Friday, 7 a.m. to 8 a.m.
Yes, sir.
And Ben, you are over at WHQR.
That's right.
You're still there?
Still there. 2 weeks running.
And you have a Sunday thing that goes out every Sunday?
Yep.
And what else do you do regularly over there?
I'm on the air every now and then. I'm on Twitter. I'm on Facebook. I'm not on TikTok. I'm too old.
You're too old to be on TikTok.
They won't let me. They're like, "Are you under 30?" And I was like, "No."
Yeah, turn your head to the left, turn your head to the right,
Yeah,
scans
yeah.
your face. Like,
No.
Can't. Sorry.
Not gonna happen. Yeah.
Can't pass.
Are you on Yik Yak, though?
I don't know what that is.
Are you on Yik Yak?
I'm not, but that's a popular college. It's a messaging app. No.
I don't know.
Yeah,
I just heard about it the other day.
Yeah, when I was in high school, it first came out. It was like kind of like how nextdoor.com, you can like segment yourself into the neighborhood you live.
Mm-hmm.
That it's for schools, and I believe it's very popular over at UNCW because when that threat of that shooting took place, I saw a bunch of screenshots on Twitter from Yik Yak. But it's not a social media like a traditional. It's like a closed source community messaging app.
Interesting.
I think. I could
Okay.
be dead wrong. There is an app like that, and I'm pretty sure it's called Yik Yak.
Okay. Well, just for the record, when I was in high school, we thought that booting up a computer with a floppy disk was a pretty cool thing.
I mean, I would argue that's pretty cool now. But
It's retro now.
yes,
It's
very
terrible.
cool now.
And I'm Reuel Sample. I'm the editor-in-chief of the Wilmington Standard. Please check us out at thewilmingtonstandard.com. Thanks a lot for joining us. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Let us know what you think, and we'll talk to you soon. Thanks for listening.